The World War has been raging for 50 years. A modern-day Genghis Khan wants to conquer the world and a shadowy organization is making its moves. So make sure your weapon's not jammed.
Lieutenant, mine's jammed again!
Remember that a shell is faster than a human, and watch out for explosive battles because today we're taking the fight to the Baron and his empire in this 2002 action and stealth first-person and third-person shooter developed by 4X Studio, Iron Storm. In this review, we're going to be looking at Iron Storm's story, gameplay and mechanics in order to answer one question. Is this game still worth playing? Let's see. Iron Storm is an alternative history first-person shooter. It's in the name of the genre, so we're going to have a lot of action, a lot of shooting enemy soldiers and blowing things up. To help us in our fight, we have a multitude of assault rifles, a great sniper, and a lot of different grenades. The game takes place in 1964 during a war that's been going on for 50 years, a little bit different than reality. History changes once the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia is defeated and the new ruler of the Russo-Mongolian Empire, Baron Nikolai Alexandrovich von Ugenberg, decides to reverse the losses Russia suffered at the start of the war. After the Empire wins a series of battles in the Baltics and Eastern Europe, the West decides to unify in order to fight the Russo-Mongolian Empire, and they create the United States of Western Europe. Seeking a way to finance the war, both sides decide to float their troops on the stock exchange. Honestly, I have no idea how this works. I don't know that much about the stock exchange, but seriously, how is this supposed to work? Are you buying stock in, for example, the British Army in its entirety? Or are you buying stock in, I don't know, the Third Army of the British Armed Forces? Are you buying stock on a division, regiment, battalion, company, or individual level? How exactly do you quantify profit? How do you get a return on your investment from a soldier shooting another soldier? Is profit generated when an enemy soldier is killed, injured, or captured? How exactly does all of this work? I have no idea. Maybe the game will explain it later. One feature of this game is that you can switch from first-person to a third-person perspective. Obviously, the first-person perspective is incredibly useful during combat. As for the third-person, it is sometimes useful during stealth sections. Yes, indeed, in addition to the action part, we also have some stealth elements that have a bit of a slasher feel sometimes. Taking on the Russo-Mongolian Empire by ourselves sometimes means slowly and methodically taking out enemies, until they see you. But we'll talk about this later.
C Company, come in. C Company. Come in, C Company, reply.
Save your voice, Captain. They've beaten off our attack. Once again.
Ah, Lieutenant Anderson.
We've been waiting for you.
Hello, James. Here's Colonel Mitchell of the Secret Service.
The Russian Mongols are working on a terrible new weapon. The kind of toy that could level our economy if it went on the market. Not to mention the effect on the ground.
Their only production site is situated under an officially abandoned factory beyond the ruins of Wolfenburg, a few miles from our lines. HQ has launched a few airstrikes against this science complex, but no luck. Just tonight, their defenses wiped out several waves of an assault. It was carnage. There's only one way to destroy this production site. Get a commando and blow it all up.
Except...
Take a sample of their invention. High Command wants to give it to our specialists. James, I've chosen you for this mission. The Colonel's not short of sabotage experts, but none of them have your knowledge of the area. You'll get through the Russian-Mongol lines easily. After tonight's little shakeup, they'll be drinking vodka till they drop. Which isn't such a bad idea.
This is an MLU, latest generation of mobile liaison units for paratroopers and commandos. With this, sweetheart, we can maintain contact and guide you right through the mission.
James, this war's 50 years old, and it's still young. But if this maniac Ugenberg produces enough of these new bombs, there won't even be enough survivors to remember it.
So our mission is to reach a Russo-Mongolian research facility where a terrible new weapon is being developed, destroy the facility, and steal a sample. Sounds easy. Once we gain control of our protagonist, we can move around the USW base where we can do a bit of exploring and find some small tidbits of information about the world, such as some talk about arms manufacturers' stock going up and down. Throughout the game we will find these computer, TV, radio, radar things that most of the time have a small cutscene that is presented in the form of a news report. Pretty neat actually. While exploring the base we also find some weapons, including our sniper. Aw, look at the cute doggies! Who's a good boy? Well, enough looking at the doggies, time for some Iron Storm.
Still going, Anderson?
What do you mean still going? Yes, I'm still following orders, and yes, I'm still in the military. That's kind of a weird comment. Welcome to the trenches.
Been waiting for you, Lieutenant. Follow me.
Welcome to war crimes? Dude, what the hell? You just shot a surrendering soldier. It seems that our troops are preparing to storm the enemy trenches. However, they can't attack until we take out the enemy snipers, and this is where we discover how dangerous snipers are. Of course, the snipers aren't alone, and as soon as we try to reach the enemy trenches, the Russo-Mongolians attack us. Sometimes getting a little bit stuck, but they are trying their best. Now in the enemy trenches, our first objective is to make our way to an old church that has been transformed into a Russo-Mongolian fortress. We're in a bunch of trenches, so we mostly walk in a straight line. However, there are a few sections where we can take out enemy soldiers using a machine gun. What exactly is Anderson holding on to in order to maneuver this thing? I don't see any handles. The church can be a difficult place to attack as there are a lot of snipers, a bunch of machine gun emplacements, and of course, a lot of soldiers. After we manage to clear the troops topside, we have to descend underneath the church where the Russo-Mongolians have a small base. I try to sneak around, but it doesn't seem to work very well, which is fine by me because that means more shooting, more hot turret action.
The guys say thanks, James.
They're welcome. After a couple of fights with the enemy in the underground halls, we exit in one of their small encampments. While troops shooting through walls are a bit annoying, they aren't as annoying or dangerous as the new enemy that's introduced in these trenches, the Mind Dogs. A fast-moving small enemy that can deal AoE damage and that can one-shot you. This is the worst enemy in the game. Even behind the fence they're dangerous, which I guess kind of makes sense now that I think about it. Nothing to see here, just a bunch of dogs eating a prisoner. Good thing these aren't Mind Dogs, though it's almost impossible to tell.
James, the Russian helicopters are bulletproof, but you should be able to shoot them down with rockets.
The what now? I hear a helicopter, but I don't see it. Oh, me and my big mouth. Of course it fires rockets. Okay, time to drop the assault rifle and get the rocket launcher. Curses. Take 2. Let's see how you like it. Take 3. Nice and easy. Caution, certain parts of the tunnel have been weakened by last night's bombing. If obstructed, clear the way with explosives. Ooh, we have to test this out. Oh, that is cool. I like the fact that we can...
Und der Typ lief schreiend im Kreis rum und schrie, wo ist mein Fuß, wo ist mein Fuß?
What were those guys sitting? Are you serious? The ground right under your feet is blown to smithereens and you just casually continue your horrible discussion like nothing happened? Sure, makes sense. Going through the Russo-Mongolian trenches, we eventually reach a bunker network, and you might be wondering, what is it that we're doing here? Well, our goal is to reach a POW camp so that we can get ourselves captured. However, the way is blocked by a huge metallic gate. The only way to get through it is by destroying the gate using a rocket launcher, which once again doesn't have any handles. Anyway, before we reach the rocket launcher, we encounter the first boss. Inside the bunker, down some extremely tight corridors, we get a boss that wields a fully automatic rocket launcher that does a ton of AoE damage. Despite the fact that I knew this guy was here, I still died 4 or 5 times. Well, now that I think about it, that is quite acceptable, as the first time I played this game, I think I died around 10, 11, 12, 20 times.
James, I just heard that some of our airlifted Frankish troops might be scattered around your sector. Now, we don't know if they're dead, alive, or held prisoner.
No, don't shoot. You're Lieutenant Anderson, our savior. All my troops have been captured. It's impossible to get into Wolfenburg. Besides, there's a camp farther on.
I wonder what region of France that Frankish soldier was from. Okay, now let's try to make our way to the camp.
Dahin würde ich mich verdammt gerne versetzen lassen.
Alarm! Get their asses down!
This way, Lieutenant. Follow me.
Right, sure, I'll follow you.
The others are being held inside the camp, Lieutenant. Get rid of those weapons on your back. They're too visible, Lieutenant.
So drop all the weapons. Got it. Let's do it. But I dropped everything. Why did the alarm start? What the hell? Take 4. We've killed 2 bosses by now, so let's talk about the boss fights. 2 bosses? Didn't we only fight the tunnel snake?
Come on, tunnel snakes! This twerp needs another lesson.
I did say that the first boss we encounter is in the tunnel of the bunker system, however, it would be more accurate to say that the first boss is the helicopter we fought while in the trenches. Honestly, I didn't really think of the helicopter as a boss because there are no mechanics. It's just an enemy that has to be killed with a specific weapon. Furthermore, throughout the game you encounter multiple other helicopters and while deadly, they stop feeling like bosses and more like roadblocks. The same can be said about the tanks, by the way. The tunnel boss fight is also bad as there are no mechanics. There's nothing clever that you have to do in order to defeat him. No. He's more or less just a guy with a bigger health pool and an annoying weapon. The good thing about the tunnel boss and his brothers that we fight later is that there's a bit of a backstory there that's covered on the news.
Да, барон великий человек, могучий и благородный, великий вождь, достойный уважения. Да, за него воюем, за него и убиваем.
Unfortunately, all the boss fights in Iron Storm are kinda lame. The helicopters, as I said, feel like lethal roadblocks, and the few bosses that are have no mechanics. Even the final boss is pretty bad. I guess there's some sort of a mechanic there, but I'm not entirely sure it qualifies as a mechanic. In the final fight there are a bunch of automated turrets that you can turn off via a switch. The thing is that the boss can turn them on. However, if you stand near the switch, he won't ever come close to it. So yeah, that's it. That's the biggest mechanic when it comes to boss fights. When it comes to enemy variety, there's not much of it. Though given the universe in which the action takes place, I think they did a good job. I mean, it's a realistic-ish war setting, so obviously you would see soldiers and officers wearing military-style uniforms. Not a lot of wiggle room. The Sturmpioniers and the Sniper Corps look like soldiers that you can absolutely imagine in an alternate history setting. The Siberian and Kazakh soldiers' uniforms are pretty cool. Look at these guys and tell me they don't mean business. Especially since the Siberian guys use rocket launchers, just like the first boss. Even the massive tanks look pretty cool. Again, given the universe in which the action takes place, 4X Studio did a great job. You will certainly not see sexy female snipers wearing red lipstick and rocking a full black leather uniform in this game. When it comes to pacing, Iron Storm goes for a moderate pace of action, having lots of shootouts followed by either stealth or by some quieter moments. And then, back to action. From this point of view, the pace is mostly okay, though there are issues that we'll talk more about in the level design and stealth sections. We'll get to those.
It's getting noisier out there. I think it's time to get out of here. Try this key, Lieutenant.
Good thing this prisoner has a key. Where did he get it and how? Who cares, it's time to escape. Ah yes, the human centipede escape plan. A classic. And they saw us. This escape plan worked just about as well as I expected it to. Here we are in the lovely town of Wolfenburg. And this level is mostly terrible. Okay, I kind of hate it. I mean, it looks pretty damn good. It looks like a town that's seen its share of war. But this place tries to kill you in so many creative and blindsiding ways, such as snipers at some windows, snipers in ruined buildings, snipers in towers, snipers just outside of your range hidden behind things, turrets, rocket turrets, soldiers spawning behind you while you're fighting other soldiers, rocket launcher dudes in tight spaces, landmines behind rubble, landmines in places you can't see them until it's too late, a tank, mine dogs spawning behind you, steam, a scripted explosive barrel, another tank, and did I mention snipers? I played this game before and I remembered most of these traps, and I still died a bunch of times, especially to the snipers. I mentioned a couple of things that I probably should explain, starting with a scripted explosive battle. You've played video games, you know that games like their explosive battles. Well, in Iron Storm, there are a couple of battles that are scripted to behave in a certain way. In a corridor with 2 enemies and a bunch of battles, if you destroy them, all except one explode. That one not exploding battle flies off in the direction you're supposed to go and then explodes. I am not joking. The game tries its hardest to bushwhack you. The second thing to talk about is the tank. What we're supposed to do here in Wolfenburg is to escape the town and infiltrate the research facility that is pretty close by. Just one small issue. There are 2 tanks in the town, one guarding the town square and the other guarding the town exit. What we have to do is to get some landmines and place them in front of the tank's tracks, exactly in the track's path. If the track doesn't go directly over the mine, it will not explode, unless you get close to it. Something worth mentioning about the mines is that you can get them from one specific part of town. Well, in order to reach that part, we have to sneak past the tank in the square. Not as easy as you'd expect, especially if you go through the tavern. Now let's get those mines. With the landmines in hand and wanting to get rid of the deadly machine, if you are unlucky to have the tank's turret aimed towards the door you have to go through, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. After numerous attempts, the tank is destroyed, for the most part. Now, we have to lure the second tank towards the town square, where we can blow it up using the first, now partially destroyed tank. By the way, did I mention that the town square is full of snipers in almost every building? There is one cool thing about the town square though, namely, you can use the tank's turret to destroy some buildings. That's awesome. Open up a small room where there's some ammo, and you can blow up the statue. This is good. This is really good, but not really worth the price of admission. Ugh, man, this place looks like something you'd see in a horror movie. Anyway, my favorite part of the game is just a bit ahead of here. It's raining, there's lightning and thunder, it's dark, it's moody, a bird keeps chirping. Well, anyway, here we have a bunch of guard towers that have snipers. If you get close enough to see the snipers, they will also see you. However, if you look at a tower and wait for a flash of light, you will see the silhouette of the snipers. This is awesome. I love this level. Inside this abandoned factory is where the Russo-Mongolians are hiding the research facility, and this is where we have another boss fight. It's not that difficult. Now, let's enter the hidden research facility. I think it's time to talk about the weapons for a bit, because by this point we've seen all of them. Yeah, Iron Storm doesn't have that large of an arsenal, being limited to an SMG, a pistol with a silencer, a shotgun, a sniper, 3 assault rifles, and a couple of special weapons. Before we go into a bit of detail, I have to mention that you can't hold all the weapons, like in Doom for example. You can only have 1 sidearm, 1 shotgun, 1 sniper, 1 assault rifle, and your machete. That being said, Iron Storm has a pretty cool little feature, which is the fact that you can just drop weapons and pick up new ones. When it comes to the small arms, you have to choose between the SMG and the pistol, as they go in the same slot. The SMG is okay, but it's obviously surpassed by the ARs. As for the silenced pistol, it's really good in stealth sections. Don't worry, we'll get to those. The shotgun is okay, maybe on the weaker side of video game shotguns, certainly weaker than the shotgun in Will Rock. The sniper is good. It's really good. It has a great zoom and it one-shots most enemies. Unfortunately, there are no shotgun or sniper variants. The ones you pick up at base are the ones you'll be stuck with until the end, which is kind of lame. When it comes to the assault rifles, there are some interesting differences. The first rifle you find being a full automatic version. I found this variant to be the best one due to its high fire rate. The second AR is semi-automatic and it only has 10 rounds as opposed to the first one that has a 35-round magazine. However, this semi-automatic version has a scope. You can use it as a type of sniper in some situations, which is pretty cool. But I still prefer the full auto version as there are times you just want to unleash an iron storm or a lead storm, whatever. The final assault rifle we find is full auto. It has a scope, it has an incredible fire rate, and it's terrifyingly accurate and stable. It's without a doubt the best weapon in the game, minus a couple of times where you need a sniper. Then why would I prefer the first AR to this one, you very perspicacious viewer might ask? Simple, you only find this weapon on 2 levels, Wolfenberg and the final level, close to the end of the game. Unfortunately, you really don't get to play around with this weapon too much, which is why I prefer the first AR. There are 2 more special weapons, the rocket launcher and the grenade launcher. They are somewhat fun, sadly you don't find a lot of ammo for them, which immensely limits their usefulness. Furthermore, they go in the same slot as the assault rifle. In addition to the weapons, we have a few grenades, explosive, cluster, mustard gas, and hallucinogenic. I honestly didn't play around with the mustard gas or hallucinogenic grenades because they release a cloud of gas, obviously, which lasts for some time, and if the grenade lands in an unfortunate place, you can end up blocking your own path. We might not have a lot of guns, but how's the action overall?
War. It's fantastic.
Well, let's start with the AI. It's not the brightest and enemies tend to just rush towards you as if it were a bayonet charge. Too bad they forgot their bayonets. Don't get me wrong, enemies do sometimes back away from you and look like they're trying to get some cover, but after a short time, it's back to the non-existent bayonet charge. Then again, it's a 2002 game, expecting enemies to try to dodge and to find cover might be a bit too much, especially since this was not a AAA game. We talked about the weapons and for the most part they are okay, however there's something off about them. I really can't place it, but when the shooting starts it feels kind of bland and generic. I don't really know if it's due to the recoil, sound design or graphics, but there was room for improvement. Sure, it's nice to see enemies go down, but it's not very interesting. You don't have the Call of Duty action pieces, the Quake all-out action, the Half-Life world building, hell, you don't even have the Duke Nukem personality. Something is missing. Iron Storm needed something extra to push the action beyond what it is. Namely, okay, I said it before, but I have to repeat it because this impacts the flow of the action. The game loves its cheap deaths. It just loves trying to kill you in ways that are surprising and annoying during combat or afterwards. I know there are people that like difficulty, I'm not one of them, but if you are, then Iron Storm's got you covered. The difficulties in this game are as follows. Easy. This in other games would be the normal difficulty. The enemies go down relatively quickly, they have less health and don't deal that much damage. Then we have normal. In other games this would be the hard difficulty. Enemies have more health and deal more damage, snipers being able to kill you with 2 or 3 shots. Finally, there's realistic. It's not quite realistic, but it's almost there. The damage that the enemies deal is insanely high. I've only played a bit on this difficulty, and despite the fact that I know this initial section quite well, I had enormous problems trying to get past it because I kept being killed after 1 shot. Not 100% sure, but what I think is happening is that a headshot is now an insta-kill. And in case you're wondering, no, there is no armor and there are no power-ups to counteract the insanely high enemy damage. If you find these types of things fun, have fun people, I don't.
Hallo, Leutnant Anderson. Sie werden zugeben, dass Ihnen in dieser Situation nur eine begrenzte Auswahl an Handlungsmöglichkeiten offen steht. Schön. Ich möchte Sie also bitten, Ihre Waffen niederzulegen und sich in das rote Quadrat zu begeben. Danke.
Sehr gut, weiter so. Jetzt die anderen.
How could this happen? We've been captured. Well, after a very long and slow walk through this facility, we're taken to our cell. This puny cell can't hold Lieutenant War Crimes Anderson. Actually, it can. Fortunately for us, after an enhanced interrogation, a prisoner breaks free and chaos ensues. Since we're unarmed, this means one thing. It's time to run. Shutting down that alarm is vital. If you leave it on, there is a good chance that the soldiers that are sent to take control of the situation here will never leave that room, and you need them to leave. After hiding in the infirmary for a while and finding a machete, well, unless you've played this game before, you're going to stumble around for a while. So let's go over what we have to do. We start off by returning to the room in which we were being held. We then break some boards that are blocking a hatch, go down the hatch into the trash compactor, followed by us trying to reach the kennels. By the way, you should destroy any turrets. It makes things easier. Now enter the kennels via the back door, because if you go via the front door, the scientists will trigger the alarm, which means you die. So, back door, kill the unarmed scientists, open the dogs' cages, which will cause a POW to run from his hiding spot and be eaten alive by the dogs, who will then rush towards the research facility and cause a commotion there, which will result in the room being cleared of any troops. Obviously, we have to reach that research facility as there's an object there that we need. However, we can't just go through the front doors as there are 2 automated turrets that will shred you to pieces, and instead what we have to do is to go back to the trash compactor and enter an air vent. Have a nice crawl through the vent to eventually enter the research facility. Now, take the thingy with a nuclear hazard symbol on it.
Well, technically, it's a thingy.
Go back in the air vent and reach the laser experiment control room. Remember, if the alarm goes off, you die. Unless you play on easy. Here, what you have to do is to take out 2 unarmed civilians, one of which is a woman. After killing those poor civilians, don't just rush in the control room like you're some sort of slasher from a 90s movie, and instead wait for one of the scientists to move away from the other guy. Then kill him and silently make your way through the left side of the control room. Quietly kill 1 more unarmed scientist, another female civilian, and the final scientist. Now that we've slaughtered unarmed civilians, including women, thank God there are no children in this game because they would not escape Lieutenant James Anderson's bloodlust. We have to go back to the laser testing room and place the nuclear thingy on the table. Good. Now, go back up, start the laser, and blow the thingy up. That's kind of underwhelming actually. Following that sad little poof, we have to return to the laser room, which is most certainly not filled with radiation, and go for a vent that leads us to the facility's reactor. Of course, we have to make the reactor go critical, so that we can kill all the civilians in this place. I mean, so that we can level this place. Seriously now, I understand that these are enemy scientists, but they are still civilians. Are we the good guys if we kill anyone and anything that moves? I don't think so. And this is why I called Lieutenant James Anderson Lieutenant James War Crimes Anderson. Anyway, we escape by stepping on some landmines that are conveniently placed next to a ladder. But no mines next to this ladder. Sure, why not? As I said, the game loves to sucker punch you. We just managed to escape by reaching an armored train that looks straight out of the Warhammer 40k universe. One of our initial objectives was to steal a sample of the nuke, or something. Well, it just so happens that a sample can be found in a secure briefcase on this train that's traveling to Berlin.
You'd be well advised to use your silencer.
And she means it. You might think that since we're on a train, it's a straightforward deal. No. This mission has us going from wagon to wagon, trying to find a way to destroy 2 helicopters, which is a lot more complicated than you'd think. Find 2 control pads that unlock the door where the briefcase is held, getting the briefcase, and a lot of stealth. I've mentioned before that this game has stealth, so now let's talk about this mechanic. Before we go into detail about the stealth, I have to mention that the first time I played this game, I was kind of shocked that this game has stealth. Initially, it looked like Iron Storm is a pure action game. We're here to fire a bunch of weapons and take down the evil empire. And then I discover what looks like some bad stealth. Is the stealth bad though? Well, let's look at some examples. The train has 2 phases, one in which you can stealth around, and then if you choose to open fire, followed by a full-on action part. During the first, more stealth-oriented part, you don't want to trigger the alarm because if you do, the automated turrets will start shooting, and they will quickly kill you on normal. If you play on easy, then you can just shoot anything that moves and not worry about the alarm. Okay, so you don't want to raise the alarm. You have a silenced pistol and a machete. Sounds easy enough, doesn't it? Well, during a playthrough I said, you know what, I'm going to stealth as much as possible on this level. I don't want the turrets to be activated at all. It doesn't matter that I can take more than a few hits because I'm playing on easy. No alarms allowed. If the alarm is triggered, it's a mission failed. Now, check this section out. There's a mechanic that has his back at us. Easy stealth kill. Did you see that? Somehow, the NPC saw me and alerted the rest of the guards in the control room, who instantly started the alarm. Mission failed. Let's try again. Down, in the shadows. We can't go through there. Maybe I have an opportunity to... I don't even know where he was. Mission failed. Again, down. Let's go left this time. Yeah, I know I missed a lot of shots, but I got so excited to see the NPC and he didn't instantly raise the alarm that I missed a lot. That being said, I think this guy still managed to raise the alarm even though I killed him before he could say anything. Again, go left. Are you serious? All I saw was the top of his head and he triggered the alarm. Mission failed. And this is the stealth of Iron Storm. It suffers greatly due to how quickly the AI detects you. If you're slightly visible, the enemy doesn't go, I thought I saw something. Must have been the wind. And move on with their patrol route. If you wait too long in a slightly visible place, the enemy doesn't become inquisitive. He doesn't say, I should check that out, and then move towards whatever it is he saw. No, in Iron Storm, the enemy sees 2 pixels and he raises the alarm. Can someone please explain to me how he saw me this time? How did this guy, because yes, it is this guy and not the guards behind him, see me? How is it possible for him to see me through that engine, or whatever it is? Now, there is a lean button in this game that you can use in certain situations. However, there are a couple of issues with leaning. First of all, when leaning, enemies can still detect you quite easily. Second, you can't move left or right, as in order to lean you have to hold down the lean button and a direction button. Finally, and probably the biggest one, you can't shoot while leaning. Realistically, leaning won't help you out in any significant way. Let me show you how I think you should engage with the stealth mechanic. No alarm, no turrets, mission accomplished. Unfortunately, there are no shadow mechanics, you can become less visible if you're standing in the dark. The AI is never cautious, it never wants to investigate, it's extremely trigger happy, it sees you through walls, and the level design is not particularly well built for stealth. As a result, you have a multitude of issues that combine in a giant ball of bad.
James, you read me? Okay. You have to find Ugenberg's quarters and steal his magnetic key to recover the sample. And if while you're at it, you can put a bullet in him, by all means, feel free.
Excuse me? You want me to steal the key from the Baron, the ruler of the Empire, by myself, and maybe kill him? This is insanity. This is pure insanity. Sure, I'll do it. After making our way out of the train station, watch out for scripted battles, we reach the Reichstag, the former German parliament. Granted, this building is now more or less just a barracks that is still incredibly well defended, including by tanks. This whole level is an absolute mess. You see, what you have to do is to reach a part of the Reichstag that is being used by the Baron as his private quarters via the roof. Please let me explain what you have to do on this level. First of all, the level takes us to the Reichstag's basement. From here we have to reach the ground floor and find an elevator. Now go to the roof, right? Not just yet. Unfortunately, you cannot just go to the roof and enter the Baron's quarters because there are 2 helicopters that are blocking us. So we have to find a rocket launcher and take those birds out. This means we need a rocket launcher. However, the only one that can be found is in the former library, now the armory, which of course is locked. This means we have to go through the assembly chamber that can be found on the first floor, and which is rigged to blow for some reason. After we escape the Michael Bay room, we reach the upper part of the library. Now get the rocket launcher, right? No, dear viewer, this is just the start. From here, we have to go through a haunted vent so that we can reach the generator room. In this room, we have to turn off the electricity to the basement and the second floor. Go through the door and blow up the barrels. This next thing is important. Once we cut power to a floor, the automated turrets are off, which is really good, but that also stops the elevator's doors from opening on that floor. So, with the power off and no more electro-aquatic show in the basement, you have to reach the outside of the building. This means a lot of walking around. Once outside, don't die, don't be killed by the tanks, and reach the platform that has barbed wire around it. From here, quickly jump through the window and find a stationary rocket launcher. Destroy the tanks and find the entrance to the armory. Pick up the rocket launcher and then go back to the elevator. Yeah, all the way back. Through the same, now most likely, mostly empty corridors. Once you finally reach the elevator, with a rocket launcher in hand, go to the top floor and down those helicopters. We're not done yet, you still can't reach the Baron's quarters because of the electrified fence. This means you have to shut down the power to the 4th floor. Hold on, don't just run back to the elevator because you absolutely have to climb on top of this thing and turn this valve. Doing this is extremely important. With the valve turned, you can now return to the generator on the 2nd floor. A new enemy appears in the corridors that you've been through, I think, at least 3 times by now, if not more, because initially you don't know exactly what you should be doing. Anyway, since we shut down the power to the 4th floor, this means that the elevator doors won't open. As a result, we have to go back to the basement. Here you can find another elevator that will take you once again to the surface. Kill all the bad guys and then reach this door. If it wasn't clear, this is why we had to destroy the tanks. With those things up, it's impossible to reach the door. Careful, watch your step. I told you to watch your step, but no. Once we go through the door, we have to climb a bunch of ladders and eventually we reach the roof. Woohoo! Yay! We did it. Now we can reach the Baron. Oh, if we wouldn't have turned that valve, we would have to redo all our steps because this door wouldn't open. There's more stuff that happens, but I think I'll just cut to the finale.
Take me for an idiot, Mitchell. I know you're the one who's trying to stop production of my new weapon, and all on the orders of your precious consortium.
You're right, my dear Baron. I put my employer's interests first. We want a war that'll last, high profits, and a high-yield market. And we know exactly what would have happened if we'd let you develop your new toys. No more fighting, no one left to fight, and you, the master of a world gone up in smoke.
You consortium scum are worse than these Bolsheviks I just crushed. You corrupt everything you touch. You dare even to sully the greatness of my destiny.
Without our financial support and our political weight, your weak empire would have long ago been in the trash heap of history.
Wait, I can still build my legend for the ages to come. Stretch out my hand to the enemy tomorrow and sign an honorable peace agreement. I can be the one who brought hope to millions of homes.
You misunderstand me, Nikolai. The Consortium's interests require that this war should continue, with or without you. The Baron is dead. It's a wonder such an old dreamer lived so long in these modern, pragmatic times.
So everything's sorted, Colonel.
Oh, yes. You can launch Operation Legacy, and have those samples taken to my plane. We're leaving immediately.
Yes, sir. And what about the body of the Baron, sir?
Let him push up daisies. Oh, and don't forget to get his magnetic key off him.
Yes, sir. Code Grey! Launch Legacy! Code Grey!
I've already talked about this boss fight, but I really have to mention that for the end of the game, we fight some guy. Colonel Mitchell's second in command or something. It's a completely meaningless fight. There are no emotions, there's no motivation, and there's no difference between killing this random guy and other consortium soldiers.
You receiving me? I've alerted our ground defenses to let you into the airspace without any trouble. You've done such a great job, and I owe you a bottle of something really nice for this one.
Hey, Chief.
I'm not really sure I understand what just happened, but I'm sure glad you're coming back in one piece. I'll see you when you land. Over now.
Несколько минут назад подразделения противника совершили беспрецедентное нападение на наш генштаб. Великий хан, барон Николай Александрович Унгенберг, лично возглавил отряд воинов и героически пал в бою, давая отпор вражеским солдатам. В Берлине созвано экстренное совещание глав силовых министерств и сформирован кризисный кабинет министров, составивший обращение к народу. Убийство нашего вождя, говорится в обращении, не может остаться безнаказанным. Это кощунственное деяние заставит нас еще крепче сплотить наши ряды. Враг должен знать, мы не отступим, победа будет нашей. Далее, один из докладчиков с гордостью объявил о выпуске на рынок нового крупнокалиберного автоматического оружия.
Oh man, what an ending. We reach the helicopter, Cecile keeps talking about what great work we did, and we hear a struggle of some sort taking place. No doubt the handiwork of the consortium. I see what they were going for with this ending, but I don't like it. I understand that it's a terrible world that's been at war for a long time and all that, but couldn't we at least let Anderson live? I mean, there clearly is a pain grunt after the helicopter hatch closes. Doesn't he deserve some peace after a lifetime of war? I also understand that it's a nice way of leaving a door open for a sequel, but I can't say that I'm a fan of this ending. Now that I think about it, Anderson killed so many civilians that his death might be some sort of karmic justice. So yeah, maybe the ending is warranted, but I still don't like it. Iron Storm falls under the category of corridor shooter. I mean, you don't always walk in a straight line, but this is what the game is. Maps such as the trenches are pretty linear, however you do get the occasional side path that keeps the game interesting. I might dislike the fact that Wolfenberg tries its hardest to kill you in annoying ways, but I like the level design. You have two ways you can reach the town square, you can explore, and you can even open up an area that was walled off. You know how when talking about the threats in Wolfenberg I mentioned steam? Well, if you turn off a valve, you gain access to a building overlooking the town square, which means you can kill most of the snipers there. The train is also pretty interesting because, as I mentioned, it has two phases, one during which you can stealth around and where you can see people for the most part just working or relaxing, because they are oblivious to the fact that the biggest danger of their lives is nearby. The second phase is an all-out shootout in the same train cars, but now the lights have been turned off and some passages have been blocked with whatever was available in the carts, which makes this level quite immersive and surprisingly atmospheric. And again, I have to mention my favorite part, where you can kill enemy snipers during a storm. Unfortunately, you then have two huge levels that are infuriatingly bad. I obviously mean the research facility and the Reichstag. Unless you know what you have to do, they are basically mazes. Furthermore, they have a lot of backtracking through mostly empty corridors, and I just hate that. With the final map taking this to the extreme. I really hated those two maps. The ideas behind them might be interesting, and they are cool locations for your action game that has stealth elements, but the execution, the way those levels are built, is absolutely horrendous. It wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about one of the biggest features of this game, the alternative history. It's mentioned that the war started in 1914, so we are clearly referring to World War I. It seems that the alternative history kicks in after the execution of the Romanovs, when Baron Nikolai von Ugenberg, with the help of Mongolian and Kazakh soldiers, takes on the Bolsheviks and manages to win. The Baron then takes control of Moscow and declares himself the new emperor of the Russo-Mongolian Empire. Worried by the rise of this new power to the east and in a financial crisis, the Western European powers decide to float their armies on the stock exchange, a move that is followed by the Russo-Mongolian Empire. After this point, all military technologies can be found on the stock exchange, bringing in some pretty big money to certain interested parties. One entity, known as the Consortium, gladly invested heavily in the war in exchange for a good chunk of the war profits. Now, the Mad Baron is close to perfecting a new deadly weapon that can end the war and the profits. This is the world of Iron Storm. When I first played this game, I thought that the primary change in this alternative history was the defeat of the Bolsheviks at the hands of the Whites, led by some fictional guy. I thought that this game is proposing that without the formation of the Soviet Union and the support that the Soviets offered to other socialist countries, socialism doesn't really become a mainstream political view, which results in capitalist countries transforming into imperialistic states where the entire economy revolves around war and the military-industrial complex. It was only after a commenter on an old video pointed out that Baron Nikolai Alexandrovich von Ugenberg might be inspired from a real-life man named Nikolai Robert Maximilian von Ugren-Sternberg, who also happened to be a baron, that I realized that this game is about a bit more than just capitalism evil. Before we look further at the world this game proposes and why I think it's bad, I want to mention a couple of things about the Mad Baron, or the Bloody Baron, Nikolai von Ugren-Sternberg. Nikolai was born on the 10th of January 1886 in Graz, Austria, in a Baltic German family. As a young boy, he was known as being such a bully that other bullies were afraid of him, and several parents did not allow their children to play with him. Nikolai was also known to torture animals, and in one case, at the age of 12, he tried to strangle his cousin's pet owl. Nikolai was extremely proud of his aristocratic family and said that over the centuries his family has never taken orders from the working classes. Nikolai, though very proud of his German heritage, strongly identified himself with the Russian Empire and believed that monarchies in Europe can return with the help of the cavalry people, meaning the Cossacks, Tartars, Mongols, and others. In the First World War, he distinguished himself as part of the 34th Regiment of Cossack troops, displaying no fear of death. He seemed most happy leading cavalry charges, for which he was decorated several times. He was also known as a reckless and mentally unstable officer. Nikolai was also a drunk that got into fights, which eventually led to his court-martial and the rest. Baron von Ugren-Sternberg was a staunch monarchist, and when the October Revolution started in 1917, he vowed to fight against the revolutionaries. I'm not going to go over his entire life. What is important to say is that the Baron won a couple of fights with the Reds, and after the fall of the White movement in Russia, he left for Outer Mongolia. In 1919, Chinese troops entered Outer Mongolia in order to end its autonomy. However, in 1920, the leading Chinese government collapsed and the troops in Outer Mongolia basically found themselves abandoned. The Baron, now in Mongolia, wanted to liberate the capital of Urga, however he suffered a major defeat at the hands of the Chinese soldiers. Following this defeat, Nikolai sought the support of the Mongols, which he got, and after rebuilding his troops, he again tried to take the Mongol capital. The assault, which lasted for days, was a victory for the Baron, and he managed to liberate the city, the Chinese suffering around 1,500 losses, while Nikolai only lost around 60 men. After taking the city, he started killing Russian, Jewish, and Chinese civilians because he thought they were Red spies. Following this major victory, a couple more battles took place and the Chinese troops were pushed out of Outer Mongolia and the country won its independence. The good times didn't last long for the Baron, as the socialists did not forget about him, and various Red Army units moved into the newly independent Mongolia and eventually managed to capture and execute the Baron for being a counter-revolutionary. Socialism. This is who the real Baron was. Now, let's look at the game's universe. I already mentioned that Baron Ugenberg, the fictional guy, declared himself the new emperor. However, the game manual describes the events following his rise to power. The Baron had the Bolshevik leaders executed. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is nullified, and a campaign to defeat the pro-independence movements and recapture territories in Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, Ukraine, and Poland is launched. The treaty gave control of some regions to Germany. With it being annulled and with Germany's defeat on the Western Front, Baron Ugenberg manages to convince Kaiser Wilhelm II to give Germany to the Russo-Mongolian Empire. Within a few years, the former Central Powers and the Balkans joined the empire in order to stop the infighting. In the meantime, the Allies in Europe unite and form the United States of Western Europe. The member states of the USW are France, West Germany, West Austria-Hungary, Italy, Switzerland, Portugal, Great Britain, Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Iceland. And its allies are the United States of America, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Jamaica, Australia, New Zealand, Angola, South Africa, Libya, Somalia, Eritrea, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. There is a lot of information provided in the game's manual that talks about events that take place in the 40s and 50s, but I have issues with the setup of this world, so I'm not going over them. On the face of it, the concept seems really interesting. Some guy manages to defeat the Russian socialists and thus the Soviet Union never comes into existence. Then we have this hyper-war economy where everyday people buy stock in military hardware and troops. While interesting, there are quite a couple of things I don't like when it comes to the alternative history that the game proposes. First, Ugenberg had to push out the Chinese soldiers occupying Outer Mongolia, mobilize the Mongolian and Kazakh people, then start fighting a war with the Russian communists and win before the 11th of November 1918 when Germany signed the armistice. In reality, Baron von Ugren-Sternberg was still fighting Chinese soldiers in 1920, so we have some issues when it comes to the timeline. Why did I mention before the armistice? Because I think that if Russia would expand westward after the armistice and started taking over Germany, that might scare the French and British so much that they would instantly go to war. A Russia that extends from Vladivostok to Berlin would be just too big a potential threat to be left alone by the Western great powers. I easily see the French and the British ceding to any major demands that the Germans might have just to bring Germany on their side. Second, there were a lot of non-trained militias in the Red Forces, but they also had officers, trained soldiers, and veterans on their side. Maybe a defeat of the communist forces during the revolution was possible in reality, but I very much doubt that it would have been a walk in the park, and the fighting would have lasted for years. Not only did the Reds have trained military men, but they also had a unifying ideology to follow, and I think that can have a morale-boosting effect on the troops. The Whites, while overall agreeing that the Socialists must be stopped, were not unified by a central belief, some of the leaders being imperialists and monarchists that wanted the monarchy restored, like Baron von Ugren-Sternberg. Others wanted a parliamentary republic, some were liberals and others were conservatives or social democrats. While I do think it's possible to unite so many different groups and shape them up for combat, I think that it would be a very difficult task and it would require quite a lot of time. Since we're on the topic of human beings fighting a war, something else that bothers me is the perpetual war. The intro mentions that the war was 50 years old. Honestly, I don't think any nation can wage modern war for 50 years. At some point, support for the war would collapse. Civilian morale can be just as important as that of the soldiers. We're not talking about a war that is comprised of small skirmishes here and there, and maybe the siege of a city rarely. We are talking about World War I extended for 50 years. Given the extremely high casualty rates of World War I think most nations would rather say just end it. If this means the end of the empire, fine. If this means we'll be poor, fine. If this means giving territory, fine. Just no more death. At some point, people just want some normality. I also doubt that the Russian people would want to restart a world war. The Russians were fighting in the Great War. Then, due to the October Revolution, they left World War I to fight in a bloody civil war. I really don't think you can get enough support to basically start it all over again, which is what would have happened by taking over the lost territories of the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, especially since that would mean attacking territories that were ceded to Germany. So, another war with Germany. I just don't see how you could get enough support for another great European war. Speaking of which, Kaiser Wilhelm II just giving Germany to Russia, the Germany of the 1910s and 20s just surrendering its independence, and the German people being fine with this. We went from the myth of the stab in the back that appeared immediately after the war to Germany basically disappearing. This is so fantastic that I don't see it happening in any way, shape or form. Let me be clear, I think people would accept the cessation of territory. They wouldn't be happy about it, but they would accept it. However, the complete disappearance of their country, I think, is out of the question. The whole thing is just absurd. But not as absurd as Austria-Hungary and the Balkans joining the empire to stop infighting. There is a reason why World War I started in the Balkans. There is a reason why it was called the powder keg of Europe. To think that any nation in the region, and I say this as a Romanian, would just surrender its independence to any empire is pure insanity that can only be espoused by someone that doesn't know the history of the region. Honestly, just like with Germany, the idea that any nation would just give up existing and accept being integrated in the empire is pure insanity. Just with Romania alone, there would be so much to talk about why that would be impossible. The last thing I find questionable is the United States of Western Europe. First of all, the game views some of these countries the same way we see them today, which is not the case. Because France was not just a republic like today, it also had a colonial empire. So did Great Britain, or to be more accurate, so did the British Empire. Canada, South Africa, Australia, Angola, Libya, Somalia, Eritrea, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco were all colonies of different empires during the First World War. They were not allies. They were colonies, and as colonial parts of the empire, they would have been fully implicated in the war. I can see a Russo-Mongolian Empire defeating Germany, maybe, but I don't think there's a single chance that a Russo-Mongolian Empire can take on the British Empire, the French Empire, Italy, Switzerland, Portugal, Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. They might put up a good fight, they would give all of them a black eye, but I think that the Russo-Mongolians would lose against such a coalition, led by the biggest empires on the planet at the time. Back then, Russia was on the road of industrialization. It was on its way to becoming a superpower. However, France and Britain were already industrialized and had access to more and larger markets for their goods, so they would have had a bigger economic potential. Obviously, this is just my simplistic view on things. In reality, it would be much more complicated than in a war country X would win. I mean, just the things I find questionable about the morale, the Balkans, the anti-independence campaign, the casualty rate and attrition would be major factors. And this is without going into detail about the economy. That being said, I will quickly mention this. Floating your armies on the stock exchange. Really? You're creating stock for like what? A tank division? A battalion? How does this work? Because the game doesn't explain it. There's stock for individual soldiers? I don't really get it. Especially since countries already had and have a couple of ways of getting more money to support a war, such as war bonds, loans, printing money, since almost everyone had left the gold standard by the time of the First World War, increasing taxes, and the good old war practice of looting, even if it is a crime. But hey, it still sounds like a better solution than floating your armies on the stock exchange. What about the consortium, the evil corporation, or maybe more accurately, evil cabal, I guess, that wants a perpetual war? Mitchell clearly mentions that the consortium is financing both sides. But why? If this group is just an organization of financiers, wouldn't it be much better to support one side over the other in return for future deals? I honestly can't make heads or tails of what the consortium wants. I mean, outside the cartoonish military-industrial complex we want perpetual war for war profits thing. At no point does the consortium want to take over the world. At no point does one or maybe multiple members decide that enough is enough. No one, after 50 years of war in which 80 million people have died, has a change of heart. Nothing. The consortium seems to enter the same category of cartoonishly evil corporation like Weyland-Yutani, Omni Consumer Products, or Umbrella Corporation.
Commitment, honesty, integrity, these are the core values that create the foundation for Umbrella.
Overall, Iron Storm does a good job of pushing into the spotlight an interesting figure from history. However, the changes that ensue following the Baron's rise to power make little to no sense, which is why I both like and dislike the universe of Iron Storm. The Soviet Union never forming is an interesting idea, but all the rest is highly questionable, to put it mildly. With such criticisms in regards to the world or universe of Iron Storm, can I call this game immersive? And can I say that I like the overall story? When it comes to the story, it's an action game, you shouldn't really be expecting a lot of story. Iron Storm has more story than something like Doom or Quake, so that's a plus. However, I can't really say that it's that impressive of a narrative. The characters are also kind of weak, and their development is non-existent. As for Immersion, I had so many questions, but only when I started thinking about things. During my playthroughs, it was actually very rare to have moments that just pulled me out of the game's world. One such moment being that time when I blew up a part of the tunnel and the soldiers above continued their conversation as if nothing happened. On the flip side, as your adventure unfolds, it's not uncommon to find a group of soldiers chatting about various things, usually the economy, which makes the game quite immersive actually.
Hast du Dragunov-Aktien gekauft?
Nee, mich interessiert nur die schnelle Kohle.
Iron Storm's no Metro 2033, that's for sure, but it's not the worst game either. Let's check out what reviewers thought about Iron Storm. Game Chronicles, 16th of November 2002. There is a reasonably good story, but it serves only to tie the various missions together. At no time do you ever get personally involved with the plot or even feel that Anderson is involved. The designers try to establish a relationship with our hero and Cecile, the girl who gives him orders over the radio, but even this part of the story falls short. In the end, you are left with a series of missions that require you only to kill or be killed, and admittedly, that is enough. The realism really hits home with the severe damage system that can often kill you with a single shot. While it's not as lethal as Rainbow Six's one-shot kill model, you will often find yourself sneaking across an area and hearing a zing of a bullet and you find yourself dead on the ground. Additional realism is also found in the weapon system that allows you to only carry a certain number and type of weapons. You will grudgingly drop your machine gun when it comes time to pick up that rocket launcher. Iron Storm doesn't break any real new ground in gameplay or visuals, but it does take an existing and oversaturated genre and spins it with a highly inventive background story, allowing for some creative missions and an amazing blend of technology that spans nearly 5 decades. GameSpot, 29th of October 2002. Have you ever wondered what the 1960s would have been like had World War I never ended? Probably not. Yet here's Iron Storm, a first and third-person shooter that attempts to answer the question no one asked. Its story doesn't make a whole lot of sense and it's sometimes frustratingly difficult, but Iron Storm is a reasonably successful action game, which is what counts. Iron Storm's gameplay is a cross between a straightforward shooter and an adventure game. Though there's a lot of gunplay, the game also has a fair number of puzzles to solve. In fact, the game's 6 levels are for the most part non-linear, often requiring you to visit certain sections repeatedly and sometimes offering multiple ways for you to complete your objectives. The puzzles are generally environmental and often involve figuring out what needs to be manipulated or blown up in order to proceed. Your goals, given to you via earpiece radio by an operative back at home base, are often a little too sketchy, though computer terminals scattered around the level provide some useful hints. The puzzle elements aren't overwhelmingly difficult, but they do slow the game down for anyone expecting an uninterrupted shooting spree. Occasionally, Iron Storm requires you to use stealth. Some of these episodes are frustrating mainly because the game doesn't really have a stealth interface. Unlike in most games that require some stealth, there isn't any real incremental feedback built into the system. You basically go prone, crawl around, and hope for the best. One section in which you have to sneak through a prison camp is a maddening exercise in trial and error. Iron Storm's combination of challenging combat and puzzle elements set it apart from most run-and-gun shooters. It could have used quite a bit more polish and it would have been more appealing as a budget-priced game, but for the 10 or 12 hours it takes to finish it, Iron Storm offers solid, if somewhat undistinguished entertainment. Computer Game World, issue 223, February 2003. Playing through Iron Storm gave me a renewed appreciation for the men who endured years of drudgery in the muddy trenches of Flanders during the Great War. The hours spent with this alternate history shooter have traumatized my eardrums, caused me to tear out my hair, and worst of all, given me hours of boredom. The gameplay itself isn't worth the headaches. The combat and weapons are standard fare, with sniping situations, melees in light quarters, and occasional stints manning stationary turrets. Much of it feels derivative, almost a Medal of Honor light, complete with a town of snipers, research base, and tank theft. Worse, there are stealth missions requiring you to sneak past enemies who are often omniscient and occasionally invincible. Unless you follow the exact path defined by the designers, you'll get spotted by the enemy even with their backs turned to you. Add that to vague mission objectives, snipers who never miss, as well as puzzle-like sequences, and you have a few hundred quick saves and loads ahead of you before you get through the game. Iron Storm isn't as bad as getting trenchfoot or being castrated by shrapnel, but it's still so full of tedium and frustration that paying for the game is pretty much an act of self-flagellation. We've finished the game, we looked at the combat and stealth, now it's time to answer the question, is this game still worth playing? The game's premise is pretty good, however I have major issues with a lot of the world building. The action overall is okay. The fact that the game tries its hardest to blindside you is not. In fact, it can be annoying. When you couple the surprise deaths with the difficulty, the game can be very annoying. The stealth is absolutely horrendous. The level design is mostly okay, minus the research facility and the Reichstag. The immersion part of the game is again okay. The story and characters are pretty weak, but this is an action game, so I'll cut it some slack. One last important thing to mention is that the game can sometimes bug out. One thing I've encountered is enemies shooting through walls on occasion. Whoops, wrong footage. There we go. Something else that I've seen is enemies being stuck in walls. While these are mostly amusing bugs, there are others that are not quite as funny. As I've said, in the research facility on one occasion, the soldiers that arrived to secure the area bugged out and didn't leave the cell area, which made progressing the game impossible. Another significant bug was when a prisoner bugged out in the middle of the stairs to the infirmary, which meant that I couldn't reach the infirmary. As a result, I could not progress the game. I think that no, Iron Storm is not worth playing. However, if you are a hardcore first-person shooter player and you have to play all the first-person shooters out there, or if you're like a super fan of old games, then yes, Iron Storm might be worth your time. I can describe this game with 2 words: cosmic banality. Unfortunately, apart from the setting, it doesn't really do anything very well. Granted, apart from the stealth, it doesn't do anything incredibly bad either. What do you think? Did you play Iron Storm, and what are your thoughts on the game? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, I hope to see you next time. Have an awesome day.